Hello indie game fans, while we eagerly await more news about Darkest Dungeon 2, here are 10 games like our favourite permadeath roguelite dungeon crawler, starting with MISTOVER, a chibi anime style one of these with tile-based dungeon exploration but that familiar side-on combat. Gather a party of heroes on a quest against a great evil, with the familiar RNG factors on hit chance, the variety of skills and abilities for each class, and of course, permadeath and losing characters if they die. The common complaint about this title is the balancing of the difficulty, in that even if you overlevel your characters, certain enemy attacks and bosses can feel so cheap, artificially inflating the duration and difficulty of the game. However, I like the art style, and perhaps with a couple more balancing patches, it might get better. One of you correctly pointed out that this is not an indie game by far, since Krafton Inc. is the parent company behind PUBG, hence its position on the list.
2052. Robotics have been endowed with a state-of-the-art artificial intelligence. It contributed greatly to the creation of a powerful and prosperous society. Exploited and oppressed, robots demonstrated for the recognition of their rights. But the reaction of the human race was predictable. You are Saya, an artificial intelligence programmed for a single purpose, offering a future to robots.
Robothorium Cyberpunk Dungeon Crawler takes place in a world where artificial intelligence has become sophisticated enough to be sentient and ask for their freedom, but humanity's response was typical in trying to crush the uprising. So lead a party of robots, take on missions and fight for a brighter future. Rather than the 4v4 organization of Darkest Dungeon, this instead has 2 columns of up to 3 units each, with attacks affecting enemies in columns, rows or single targets. Good variety of status effects, weapons, equipment upgrades, crafting, robots, and even leveling up for your characters, but this is more of a casual experience since the permadeath has to be turned on as an option, but a good introduction to the genre for sure.
Since the Vambrace entered my possession, I have been plagued by unsettling dreams of a ghostly blade, cutting me down.
Speaking of anime Darkest Dungeon, the game that perhaps did it the best visually is Vambrace Cold Soul. Wielding the cursed Aether Brace, our heroine manages to enter a city covered by the blight of Frostfall, besieged by the King of Shades, in search for answers. However, the remaining survivors now look to her as the best hope against the enemy, and you gather your party and set off on expeditions. In terms of style, this has the same 4-character party structure and side-scrolling combat and exploration, where position matters, and it even has a JRPG style turn order bar. However, there's quite a lot of missing information, such as possible damage ranges, percentage chance to hit, status effects, chance and so on, so it's a shot in the dark as to what your abilities do. Furthermore, this is not as punishing since your main character can't be killed and you can retreat from a mission without much of a penalty, retaining your loot obtained which can be used for crafting. As such, the Darkest Dungeon comparison is more on the art, which is excellently done, but the game itself leaves much to be desired.
It all went wrong. It was an ambush. You are left in command now, with what few men remain.
Visually, Battle Brothers looks nothing like Darkest Dungeon, but hear me out. You have to manage a mercenary company, recruiting and equipping new members, and travelling across the procedurally generated open world, taking on contracts with permadeath for your characters and some elements of high fantasy.
We've done it before, and we'll do it again. We'll make the company known throughout the land.
What I find most interesting about this game is the leveling and equipment system, where there are no restrictive classes, but characters can develop in whatever way you choose. equipment also plays a factor, where you can build a wall of spears at the front, but equip some of your people with war hammers and maces to crush your enemies as well. However, this has a much larger number of units on screen, effectively conveying the whole mercenary company thing, so unique in its own way and worth checking out.
Stand the battle, brothers!
Among the games on this list, Mad Crown is perhaps most similar to MISTOVER covered earlier due to the tile-based dungeon exploration with side-on combat, but interesting take on the genre. The art style has a similar feel to Darkest Dungeon, but is its own unique thing with interesting looking character classes as well. Same procedural generation, permadeath and otherworldly vibe, but there is an element of continuity since if your party is defeated, the next group has a chance to encounter your lost possessions. Search for the legendary Mad Crown in order to become king, and is set in a diesel punk universe, which is a nice change of pace from the steampunk that we normally get. Do note that it is from a Chinese developer, so the translations can be a little bit rough and the overall polish is perhaps not quite there, but an interesting game nonetheless. For the King is quite the interesting title since it combines turn-based combat, roguelite, and tabletop RPG campaigns into quite a unique experience. There are multiple campaigns and stories to play through, the first to take revenge for the king who was murdered, as you travel across the continent, taking on side missions and lowering the level of chaos in the world, which would bring about the end of the world if not contained. If you do die and fail a campaign, you can unlock new items and upgrades with a neat polygonal art style as well. Pretty impressive, so don't sleep on this one. Sin Slayers is a roguelite turn-based RPG where you lead a team of heroes and have to slay the various Sin Lords representing the 7 deadly sins. You can only have a party of 3 characters, and there isn't any positional based attacks, but a character at the front is the vanguard and gets a boost to defense. This has a sin system where you can dig up graves and loot unguarded possessions, but this will increase your sin level, making monsters stronger and decreasing your rewards. This is more on the RPG side of things, with enemies having certain weaknesses in that rock, paper, scissors kind of way, but I do like the simple pixel art in this.
We were young, full of life.
Looking forward to tomorrow.
The thing is,
We had to fight for our tomorrow.
Historical games based on war
The
are a
enemy
tough one to
occupied our
talk
home.
about, since using fun
And
as a
victimize
descriptor
us.
is not the most appropriate.
we had to rise.
And learn how to become heroes.
Warsaw covers the ill-fated Warsaw Uprising in World War II Poland, where the remains of the armed forces came together with civilians to fight against the occupying forces. From the art style and animation, one can certainly see the Darkest Dungeon influence, but there are some unique features that makes it stand out. First of all, both your party and the enemies are on a 2x4 grid, where position matters in terms of attacks and abilities, cover and even flanking opponents to do more damage. Of Of course, shots fired requires ammo, which takes up space in your inventory, and there is a meta management layer as well. On top of tending to the injuries of your crew, you have to go on missions in the various districts of the city, scavenging for supplies or taking out enemy patrols, each feeding into an overall momentum meter fueling the resistance, where it is game over if the meter is depleted. Beautiful art and clever systems which has steadily gotten better with more balancing patches. Sci-Fi Darkest Dungeon is a reductive way to look at deep sky derelicts, since the art and combat animations are very similar, with procedurally generated spaceships, permadeath of characters, and an unforgiving combat system. However, this does lean a little bit more in that RPG direction, since you are encouraged to keep your party alive and to return intact to the home base where you can take on new missions and go adventuring. There is an energy resource that you need to manage, where if you run out while exploring a derelict, your party basically gets eliminated. However, there's no penalty for retreat, so a little bit of a compromise on the difficulty. The other major area is the combat, which actually has deck building elements based on equipment for every individual character, so an interesting fusion of genres.
I am a mortal, but when this world ends, even I will know oblivion.
To date, I think that even while in early access, Iratus, Lord of the Dead, manages to capture that same feeling of Darkest Dungeon, but with his own unique take, and it's not just a simple clone. While the art style isn't as impressive, this is a dungeon crawling RPG where you play as a necromancer instead, having to fight off the humans and dwarves who imprisoned you many years ago.
My kingdom comes!
Instead of recruiting random mercenaries, you instead construct undead minions from the parts gutted from your enemies, with, hilariously enough, higher quality parts translating to better stats. Combat is 4v4 with positional combat, with some nice variants in units and enemies as well. There are meta progression elements, so all is not lost, since you can level up, put points into your necromancy skills, and even base building aspects by reconstructing your stronghold. Suitably macabre theme which is excellently done, and this game should be excellent once out in 1.0, taking the #1 spot. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, share and subscribe. Check out the recommended playlist or the best pick for you, and I will see you after the jump.